The Tao of Self-Confidence, episode 679. Welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence, where I share stories of amazing women who have discovered their inner journey to self-confidence. Visit our website at thetaoofselfconfidence.com. Your inner journey to self-confidence awaits. Well, hello, friend. Welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence, where I share stories of amazing women who have discovered their inner journey to self-confidence. I'm your host today, Sheena Yap Chan, and today I have a phenomenal lady on the show today. She is a freelance writer, a journalist, and also the author of the book Get Money, and I'm really excited to have her on and share her story with us today on self-confidence. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Kristen Wong. Kristen, how are you today? Maybe you can fill in a little bit more about yourself to the listeners.
Yeah, I'm well. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I think you nailed it. I'm a freelance writer, journalist. I write about all kinds of topics, usually related to human behavior. Sometimes that's personal finance and psychology, gender identity issues, things like that.
Thanks for sharing that. And what's your cultural background?
I am Chinese and white. My mom is from Hong Kong, and my dad, I don't really know my biological dad, but he was white. I do know that.
Thanks for sharing that. And Kristen, what's your favorite self-confidence quote?
I actually wrote an article about self-confidence and self-compassion and sort of the relationship between the two. And I talked to this researcher, Dr. Kristen Neff, who she's done a TED talk on this, and she's a self-compassion researcher, which sounds like a really cool job. And she said something about becoming friends with your inner critic, because I think a lot of times when it comes to self-confidence, we feel like we lack it because we have this strong inner critic in our head that's just kind of telling us we suck and we're terrible. And her take is that inner critic is not actually your enemy. It's actually there to protect you. It's usually there to protect you, to keep you from experiencing bad feelings like failure. Because if you tell yourself, oh, I can do this, I'm great at this, I can do this, that means you're going to try at something and you're going to break out of your comfort zone, which means you could very possibly fail, because failure is kind of a part of success, right? And so her idea is, instead of trying to push that voice out and say, you're the enemy, go away, stop talking down to me. The idea is to recognize that it is actually there to instinctively protect you. So becoming friends with your inner critic and saying, like, look, I don't need protection right now. I need confidence right now, is actually a great way to go about getting that confidence.
Awesome. And I really love that quote that you mentioned. I know as women, our inner critic can be our greatest enemy, but like you mentioned, it can also be our greatest friend, and it could be a great support system, right? Telling us, I get that you care, and I appreciate that, but let's go out and do it, because we never know what's going to happen, right? So I really like that piece that you mentioned, so thanks for sharing that. And in your own words, how do you define self-confidence?
Well, I think there are a couple of different ways of thinking about it. The traditional definition is that it's self-confidence is trusting your skills, trusting your abilities, trusting yourself. But I think the way that, we kind of casually define it, especially when we talk about it as women, is I think self-confidence is really just being comfortable with who you are and being comfortable in your own skin, loving yourself despite your flaws, despite your shortcomings, being okay with those things. To me, that's what self-confidence is.
Thanks for sharing that great definition. And Kristen, what was your life like before your discovery of self-confidence?
I was very shy, kind of meek. I did not speak up for myself often. I was not comfortable in my own skin. I was constantly comparing myself to others. If there was something at work that needed to be done, I was always the first person to do it, even if it disrupted my schedule, disrupted my weekends. I was always the one staying late, coming in when I didn't want to. And this just really built up a lot of resentment in me. And so I was kind of one of those people who I was shy and indirect, but inside I was seething with rage because I was never speaking up for myself, and learning to be a little bit more comfortable with who I am, not comparing myself to others, accepting myself as the imperfect being that I am. Like, that made me so much more comfortable with feeling like I'm allowed to have a voice, feeling like I'm allowed to push back and speak up and do things that I never thought I would do, like negotiate or say no to staying late at work.
Thanks for sharing that. And I think we all go through that, right? Like we just feel like we're not enough and we're not, if we say something, we might piss off somebody else. Not realizing like, we have a voice and the right people will understand what you're saying, especially when you have a big purpose out there. Like, I don't think you'll ever say anything wrong. And if you do, it's not like anything crazy, right? Because you come out with good intentions. I mean, we all go through that, right? Sometimes we want to write something, but we feel like we're not the greatest writers, or maybe we're not the best speakers. But if it comes from the heart, I mean, I think it's all that matters, right? But what was that point in your life when you realized like you were more than enough to go out there and be who you are today? What was that aha moment?
For me, it really had to do with negotiating, which again was something I had never done before, because like you said, I'm sure you felt this way too, just like you're not allowed to have a voice. If you're not allowed to speak up, you're not allowed to advocate for yourself, because who are you to do that? I always felt like that. Like, I'm like, who are you to negotiate, right? And so then I read this book by an author named Barbara Stanny called Secrets of Six-Figure Women. And I just kind of read this book because I was going to review it for this blog that I wrote for. But it was so eye-opening to me because in the book, she talks about like traits of under-earners. And under-earners, in her definition, are women who are not adequately meeting their earning potential. So they're not making as much money as they could be. And so I was like, okay, I'm not one of these people. But then I read every trait and it rang so true. Like, she was like, they're afraid to negotiate. They believe in the nobility of poverty. They undervalue their professional work. And everything she said was like so true for me that the remedy for all of that in her eyes was negotiating, like women leaning into negotiating more. So I just tried an experiment where one year I was like, I'm just going to negotiate to see if this woman is right, if this Barbara Stanny woman is right about me being an under-earner. So I went to every freelance client. I'm freelance. So I went to every client that I worked for and I asked them for just a little bit, I think like 10 to 20% more than I was making. And to my surprise, they all said yes. Like, every single one was like, oh yeah, that's fine. Which on the one hand was really exciting because I was getting paid more money. But on the other hand, it made me realize, wow, I am an under-earner and I've really been undervaluing my work. And that was kind of an aha moment in terms of money, because I was like, wow, if I'm undervaluing myself here, I'm probably really undervaluing myself in a lot of areas in life.
Thanks for sharing that. And I'm glad you're able to share that story, especially as women, right? We tend to undervalue ourselves, and, it doesn't help like, women get paid less than men, especially if it's the same position, right? They always say women get paid like 30 cents less than a man, like for each dollar. And even like, you have male coworkers that tell you like you are overpaid as a woman, and which to me, it's like, because that's happened to me, right? I was told I was overpaid as a woman, and that really like brought me down. Like, I just like thought, okay, I guess I can't make any more than the cap that they told me. But then I realized like that was just words and it was not the truth. But when you're like in that stage where you're not confident in yourself and you think you are, undervalued, like you believe it, right? And I think that's something we all go through. And I think that's great that you're able to take little steps to negotiate, whether if it's $1 more or $10 more, it's still more than what you had from the beginning. And those little steps are what creates that big result, right? Just even practicing like negotiating, right? Like it's great because then you know what works and what doesn't work and what you can go after and what you can't, right? It's just all like a test run. And it's just the results can be surprising at times, right? And because of your realizations, what's your life been like now?
I still kind of struggle even with negotiating because there's still that little voice in my head that's like, you like that, like your coworker said, you're making too much for a woman. Which, by the way, so when you were talking about that, I just remembered this interesting research I read yesterday for an article that I want to pitch on how employers actually see masculine traits as more competent. So when they think of like competency and how good someone is at a particular job, their thoughts go to like masculine features, whether that's like facial features or like social features that are typically deemed masculine. And that's so infuriating as a woman because it's like you are literally valuing me less because I'm feminine, because I have these like socially feminine traits, which is so frustrating because like it's hard to break out of this under-earner mindset when like we are getting all of these social cues around us that we are worth less. Yeah. So, it's still kind of a struggle, but I think you're spot on when you say like every little step is important because every time I negotiate, every time I just speak up for myself in a, any kind of situation, a low stakes situation, like if I want a different table at a restaurant, such a stupid thing to like be worked up about, not speaking up. But like those small things help me get more comfortable and more, by that definition, more self-confident, because I'm like, I'm comfortable asking for this. I am no less of a human being than you are. And, I deserve to have this table just as much as the next person. So I'm going to be okay with asking for that.
Thanks for sharing that. And I think that's great that you mentioned that because, we tend to think if we ask for those little things, it's like you mentioned, we're overreacting or we're too much or we're too extra. But I mean, it starts with those little things, right? And it's not like you have to be, like bad about it. I mean, you can just ask nicely, but at least if you asked and you know the answer, it's better than not asking, right? It's better than thinking, what if? Like I remember reading a book about a test where this guy is given a yellow notebook, but he really wanted a pink notebook, but he just settled for the yellow notebook because it was just there and he was told that you're getting the yellow notebook, but really he could have just asked if he could switch with someone. And that was like a big, like, oh my God, right? Like it's so simple. We don't think that we always have a choice no matter what. Even if, there's circumstances presented to us, like it's still up to us to make that choice. So I really love you mentioning, like, even if it's just moving to another table, like, you still have that choice. And, to the woman who's listening to your episode, she may be in her own journey to self-confidence. What would be that one tip you would give to her?
One tip I would give is to make friends, make friends with your inner critic. Because I think when like that little voice in your head that we've been talking about that tells you you're not good enough. I think the more we try to see that voice as the enemy and push it away, it's really what we're doing is working against our psychology. And that's rarely an effective solution for anything. You have to work with your own human behavior and your own psychology and understand that inner critic has a utility, which is to protect you. But as a self-confident person, you don't need that. And I think that's an important first step on your journey to self-confidence is telling yourself that I don't need protection because I'm going to be okay stepping outside of my comfort zone and I'm going to be okay with who I am. And it might not, I might fail sometimes. I might not be perfect sometimes, but self-confidence really is about accepting that and doing things anyway.
Thanks for sharing that great tip. And if our listeners wanted to get to know a little bit more about you and what you do or check out some of your work, is there any links or social media profiles we can connect with?
Totally. I am on Twitter and Instagram at The Wild Wong. And my newsletter you can find it at kristenwong.com/newsletter.
Thanks for sharing that. And to our listeners, if you want to connect with Kristen, you can also head on over to the taoofselfconfidence.com and search for Kristen's name. Her show notes will pop up along with everything else that we talked about. And I really just want to thank Kristen today for taking the time to share her story and tips with us on self-confidence. So thank you so much, Kristen.
Thank you. Thanks for putting this out there.
Oh, thank you. And thanks again for doing this. I really appreciate it. And to our listeners, be on the lookout for another new episode of another amazing woman's journey to self-confidence. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now. Thank you for tuning in to another amazing episode of the Tao of Self-Confidence. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to get your daily boost of confidence.